Hey guys, welcome to today's video. We're going to be breaking down and looking towards the offseason for the Miami Dolphins and how their 2020 NFL season went. Before we get started, I'd really appreciate it if you dropped a like and a sub. I'm currently coming out with daily NFL videos, so if you're interested in more daily NFL content, please hit that like and that sub. I'm currently trying to get to 1,000 subscribers by the middle of January, so I'd really appreciate it if you help me out. That said, let's dive right into the video, and I hope you enjoy. So before we really get started, let's just talk about the overall stats and just the overall point of view from when it comes to the Miami Dolphins this season. So they went 10-6. They were the 8th seed in the AFC. They missed out on the playoffs by one spot, and that really happened because they lost to Buffalo in that final game, where they completely got clobbered 56-26. So when we look at their stats, their team stats, they were 22nd in total offense this year, 20th in passing offense, 22nd in rushing offense, and 15th in scoring offense. And then defensively, they were 20th in total defense, 23rd in pass defense, 16th in run defense, and they were 6th in scoring defense. So pretty much a below average offense and a very good defense that was able to stop the run pretty well, not give up too many points, and really keep the offense in games. And when we talk about the offense, let's start talking about the offense with Ryan Fitzpatrick versus Tua Tagovailoa. So when Ryan Fitzpatrick was in at the beginning of the season, and even against the Jets and towards the end against the Raiders too, where we saw him make a Fitzmagic appearance, we saw him really be able to push the ball down the field. And that was because Chan Gailey's offense was really structured around Ryan Fitzpatrick, allowing him to use his weapons, guys like DeVante Parker, Gesicki, and allow them to run straight downfield, and for Fitzpatrick to have the arm strength and the accuracy and the willingness to throw the ball downfield. I'm not saying that Tua does not have the arm strength or accuracy to throw the ball downfield. I'm just saying Tua didn't do that when he was in at quarterback. And I don't know if that's because of Chan Gailey. I don't know if that's because he didn't want to throw the ball downfield. It could be a variety of things. But when Ryan Fitzpatrick was in, he was fantastic. I mean, he threw for over 2,000 yards this year on 68.5 completion percentage, 13 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. And when the Dolphins decided to go to Tua after the bye week against the Los Angeles Rams, which is the game they ended up winning, they really did it because they didn't want to turn the ball over as much as Ryan Fitzpatrick was turning the ball over. And they also wanted to give Tua a chance to see what they had, right? And it was a perfect idea. I mean, he played pretty well for the first few games. He wasn't really throwing the ball deep downfield, so he wasn't really getting a ton of passing yards, but he was getting the job done. And he finishes the season with 1,814 passing yards on 11 touchdowns and 5 interceptions and a 64.1% completion percentage. Not great stats, okay? He was very good at not turning the ball over, and pretty much until that Buffalo game where, I mean, he kind of had to force the ball into some situations and ended up getting a lot of interceptions. Finished that game with 1 touchdown and 3 interceptions. But overall, Tua this season had a very up and down year. He had some fantastic games where Dolphins fans were about to say, oh, this guy is definitely the guy. Like, if you look at that Arizona game, that made Dolphins fans excited. But then if you look at games like against the Raiders or against the Broncos, and it's just more of the same old Tua that Dolphins fans just don't want to see. So it's a really up and down year when it comes to Tua. And it really starts with Tua's game. And the question marks that come from Tua's game. I mean, is Tua the franchise quarterback? Is he really going to be the future? But that's all something that the Dolphins front office is going to have to decide for themselves. Did they see enough from Tua to grant them another year of Tua? Right? They have the 3rd overall pick this offseason thanks to the Laramie Tunsil trade. So that'd be a prime spot to take a future quarterback if they believe that Tua was not the guy. However, I believe Tua was the guy. And I like what I saw from him at times this year. He still needs to learn. He still needs to develop. But overall, this quarterback, I think he has promise. I mean, he's got great leadership skills. We saw a lot from him this year. And his mobility was something that was interesting to see develop too. I mean, his ability to get outside the pocket and pick up yards on the run was something that really helped the Dolphins offense at times this season too. I mean, he's a smart football player. So I think if you can develop that, that would be big for Miami. But definitely, there are some question marks surrounding him. That's something that the offseason is going to be interesting to watch for the Miami Dolphins. However, when you look around him, he did not really have much talent around him to throw to. I mean, DeVante Parker was injured a lot of the year. He did end up leading the Miami Dolphins in receiving yards. He finished with just under 800 receiving yards, 793 receiving yards, and 4 receiving touchdowns on 63 catches. But wide receiver-wise, I mean, there was injuries everywhere. No DeVante Parker for a good part of the year, or an injured DeVante Parker for a good part of the year. Preston Williams was out for a large part of the year. But when Preston Williams was in, Him and Tua looked very good together. So that might be something to watch moving forward. Lynn Bowden had a nice few games towards the end of the season, but he didn't look like a legit starting receiver. I mean, he looked like a potential future slot, maybe fourth receiver that the Dolphins can count on in open space, maybe run a few trick plays for. They did do that, and that did work well. I mean, if you look in that Chiefs game, there was a few plays where Lynn Bowden was able to get outside the pocket, even as the quarterback or as a running back, and really pick up yards. And then there's Jakeem Grant, who had a very up and down season too. I mean, this guy was good when it came to some games, but really bad when it came to others. He had a few really big drops. He had that big drop, I think it was against the Chargers, I want to say. Don't quote me on that. And he had a big drop against the Chiefs. Like, there were just drops from Jakeem Grant all day. But, I mean, as a punt returner, he was very good. He ended up having a punt return touchdown this year. So that's good for him. But overall, the wide receiving cores were very limited this year. I mean, Preston Williams was injured. Lynn Bowden looked good at the end, but it wasn't really there for the first half of the season. DeVante Parker was shaky because he wasn't healthy all year. But overall, I mean, this is something that's going to need to be worked on this offseason. Get another wide receiver in the building. Is that going to be with the 3rd overall pick? Is that going to be with the 18th overall pick? Look at guys like DeVonta Smith, Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle as potential names for wide receivers in Miami. I think DeVonta Smith would personally be a very good fit. Obviously, played at Alabama with Tua, so that would be great for chemistry reasons. Personally, I think I actually prefer Jamar Chase. Maybe just a little bit. But overall, DeVonta Smith would still be a great pick, and maybe that chemistry makes him an even better pick than Jamar Chase. However, it's not just the wide receiver position, it's also the running back position this year that was very shaky for the Miami Dolphins, and that didn't really allow the Dolphins to have any real success running the football. Towards the end of the year, they got better at it. Salvon Ahmed had 120-something yards against the Patriots, but the main guy was Myles Gaskin. And that was towards the end of the season where he really picked up. I mean, this guy had 584 rushing yards on the season. I think he just had over 300 receiving yards on the season, 3 rushing touchdowns too. So he was a big guy for this Miami Dolphins team. But when you look at the other big running backs in the NFL, I mean, their running backs rushing for over 1,000 yards. I mean, Derrick Henry rushed for 2,000 yards. So Myles Gaskin didn't have a great season when it comes to the NFL. He had a good season for the Dolphins, but not a great season. So the running back position is going to be something that's going to need to be built on. I mean, the guys that the Dolphins brought in the offseason, and guys like Jordan Howard and Matt Breida just did not really do well. I mean, Jordan Howard had a few rushing touchdowns early in the year. He had one against the Patriots, and then I think he had one against the Bills too. But I mean, he got cut after a few games. I mean, he just did not have the impact. He really was not able to push the football down the field. Matt Breida, on the other hand, he didn't really get going either. He had a nice game against the Patriots. I think he had like 81 rushing yards on 10 attempts or something like that. So he showed up at times, but overall, both of those guys were not good. So it was really Ahmed and Gaskin who were able to really produce at times, but I don't think either of them are long-term answers. I think Gaskin could be a good second option next season, but I think the Dolphins really need to invest some draft capital in a very good running back, and the good thing for them is that there are very good running backs in the upcoming draft. And then let's move on to the tight end position. This tight end position was the one bright spot on this offense. Actually, one of the 2 bright spots on this offense, I'd say. We'll get to the second one in a second. They were the most productive tight end group in franchise history by the Miami Dolphins, and that all stems from Mike Gesicki's success. I mean, Gesicki was fantastic. 53 catches, 703 yards, and 6 receiving touchdowns. And then there was Durham Smythe, who had 29 targets, 26 catches, 208 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns. And then, of course, there was also Adam Shaheen, who was pretty solid too. I mean, he had 12 catches, 150 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So this tight end group was fantastic for the Miami Dolphins. They were very good because they were able to catch footballs in the red zone, one of the best tight end groups in the NFL in that regard. But more importantly, they were very adept to Chan Gailey's style of play, which was the dink and dunk offense, especially with Tua Tagovailoa. Gesicki was very good with Fitzpatrick. I'd say Shaheen as well as Durham Smythe were a little bit better when it came to Tua Tagovailoa, but all 3 of these tight ends were very impactful when it came to the Miami Dolphins and what they wanted to do throwing the football, and even running the football too. Shaheen as well as Smythe are very good blocking tight ends, and Gesicki has developed into a better blocker, although he's mainly the pass-catching tight end on this Dolphins roster. Finally, though, let's look at the offensive line, and this offensive line had an interesting season. I'm going to say an interesting season because I believe that all 3 of the rookies, Solomon Kinley, as well as Austin Jackson, as well as Robert Hunt at right tackle / right guard, were all hits. I think the Dolphins did a fantastic job upgrading this offensive line. And last year, this offensive line was the worst in the NFL, and this year it was about an average, maybe just above average offensive line. So that's huge improvement. Although there's still stuff to work on, and I'd still say it's going to come from development rather than drafting players. I think that this Dolphins offensive line was really good this year. I mean, Solomon Kinley was fantastic. He ended up being a great mauler, and he was able to really push defenses tackles, make space for the run game, and he was a big part of this Dolphins run game. The Dolphins love to run behind Solomon Kinley because he had such a good year. I mean, he did give up 5 penalties and 4 sacks, but what he was able to do as a run blocker was really interesting and really good to see from that Dolphins 4th-round pick. And then, I mean, we look at Robert Hunt in the right tackle. I mean, he had a very shaky start, but he played fantastically down the stretch. I mean, he only gave up 3 sacks. It was really more of a penalties thing, false starts, some holds. He gave up 8 penalties this year, but 3 sacks is really good for a second-round tackle. It's really raw. I mean, all of these guys the Dolphins drafted are super raw coming into the 2020 NFL season. So imagine another year of good offensive line coaching and another year of coaching and development. This offensive line could be really good. Top 10 is definitely possible. And then at left tackle, Austin Jackson. He had a good year too. Only 4 sacks allowed, 5 penalties allowed. So, I mean, overall, this offensive line was very good thanks to the rookies that they drafted. I don't think this offensive line is something that's going to really need to be improved on. Maybe the center position is something that's going to need to be improved on. Ted Karras had a solid year. I mean, he only gave up 2 sacks and 3 penalties, but he looked a little bit shaky in run blocking. He had a few mishaps snapping the ball this season. So overall, I think Ted Karras is probably the only position where it's probably up for grabs. He's an unrestricted free agent this offseason, so it'll be interesting to see if the Dolphins end up re-signing him. And then Ereck Flowers was a guy that they brought in for big money this offseason, who some teams and some players and some people turn their heads at. They thought they gave him too much money, but overall, this guy's been really good this year. Really good run blocker. He was the core of this offensive line when it comes down to it. 5 sacks allowed, 3 penalties. He was fantastic in run blocking. In pass protection, he was a little bit not as good. But overall, this guy was a team-first guy, and he really was the glue for this offensive line. And finally, Jesse Davis is another name I really want to talk about. He played the most snaps out of anyone on this offensive line. Only gave up 1 sack and 2 penalties. He had a fantastic year. I mean, he played guard, he played tackle. He may have even played center at one point. But overall, Jesse Davis was fantastic, playing different places. He was never necessarily a starter, but he did start at times with injuries. But he would fit in at different places, and he played really well. I mean, Jesse Davis, thanks to him, this Dolphins offensive line was 6 deep and had 6 legit players that could really play and help out the Dolphins' run and pass game. And that's pretty much the offense. That's going to really sum up the offense this season. The only thing I want to talk about is Chan Gailey. I did not really like what I saw from him, especially when it came to Tua. I mean, maybe you give him another year with Tua, see how he can develop Tua. But I just did not like the offense with Chan Gailey with Tua. So that's my personal opinion. But now let's look at the defensive side of the football. And this defense was all about bending but not breaking. They gave up a lot of yards on the ground and through the air, more through the air than on the ground. But they were very good when it came to forcing turnovers and getting back in football games. I mean, they had some elite turnover guys, and that all starts in the secondary with guys like Xavien Howard and Byron Jones. So, although Byron Jones did not have a great season, I mean, he was very shaky. He gave up a lot of big plays against Nelson Aguilar. He gave up a big play against the Cardinals. He was not good. He still had 2 interceptions on the year, which was a big for him. He was coming to the season without any interceptions last year. And overall, he allowed for Xavien Howard to have the season that he had, and he was just that second elite corner in the secondary that really kept this Dolphins defense together. But when it comes to corners in the Dolphins secondary, it all starts with Xavien Howard. I mean, Xavien Howard was fantastic this year. 11 total turnovers forced, 10 interceptions, 1 forced fumble. I mean, he was elite. He was arguably the best corner in the NFL, up there with a guy like Jair Alexander, or a guy like Marlon Humphrey, or even J.C. Jackson. Personally, I think Xavien Howard was probably the best out of all the corners this season. I am a Dolphins fan, so that might be a little bit biased, but overall, I mean, this guy was fantastic. Like, so fantastic. I mean, in that Raiders game, when it came down to it, really important game, I mean, he was targeted 4 times, allowed 1 catch for -1 yard. So if that doesn't scream elite to you, I don't know what does scream elite to you, but this guy was fantastic. Led the league in interceptions. First time someone has had 10 plus interceptions since I think 2007 or 2008. So this guy was fantastic, record-breaking season. But also another guy that was really good was Nik Needham. Quiet guy, slot corner for the Miami Dolphins. he had a really good season. I mean, obviously with Byron Jones and Xavien Howard being two of the most highly paid corners in the NFL because they're two of the best corners in the NFL. Nik Needham was a guy that's going to be targeted a lot, and he really held his ground at the slot corner position. He was originally an undrafted free agent last season, and the Dolphins signed him. He was one of the lone bright spots on that Dolphins defense last year. And then you look at what he was able to accomplish this year: 2 interceptions, but I mean, he was just fantastic. He did have a lot of pass interference calls. That really happens with slot corners, especially guys that aren't Byron Jones or Xavien Howard. And he was targeted a lot too, but I liked what he did. He was very good. He even got a few sacks on the quarterback. I just liked his overall season, what he was able to do. I just really liked what I saw from him. And then, I mean, guys and Dolphins fans are going to ask about Noah Ogbah, the Dolphins' first-round pick. Now, this was a disappointing season when it came to Noah Ogbah. He struggled early in the season against Jacksonville, against Buffalo. Did not play well whatsoever. But you got to remember, this guy's young. He's the youngest player in the NFL. He's only played corner for a few years. He's still adjusting to the position. And if you look at a guy like Xavien Howard coming out of college, a guy who was picked in the second round out of Baylor, high potential player, but he was very raw coming out of college. I mean, he did not have the skill set that he has now. So maybe if the Dolphins can develop him like they developed Xavien Howard, maybe there's a chance for Noah Ogbah to be really good coming forward, but I think he's still a project guy. He's a project guy. He played mostly special teams this year. It's a little bit disappointing to see from a first-round pick, but anyway, that first-round pick was basically a luxury pick at that point. So I don't think Noah Ogbah was necessarily a bad pick. He just did not play this well this year. I would have liked to probably see the Dolphins maybe take a running back instead of Noah Ogbah at that selection back in April, but overall, I mean, he's still learning, he's still developing to the NFL level and how the NFL game is played. So don't count out Noah Ogbah just yet. Let's go to the safeties, okay? The safeties in the secondary. So Eric Rowe and Bobby McCain. Let's start with Eric Rowe. He was fantastic all year. Except when it came to playing elite tight ends. So Travis Kelce and Darren Waller pretty much had their way with him, but all the other tight ends in the NFL that he played, he did a very good job defending. I mean, that's pretty much all I'm going to say from Eric Rowe. He had 2 interceptions, but he was the second team leader in tackles, only behind Jerome Baker. He was really good at the safety position. He was a lock there. He was a guy that he could really match up against opposing tight ends. Did struggle against the elite tight ends, but everyone struggled against Darren Waller and Travis Kelce this year. But he really was able to shut down the tight end position when it came to the Miami Dolphins defense. And then Bobby McCain played that real deep safety role for this Dolphins defense. And he was good in that role. I mean, he had 1 interception against, I think, the 49ers. And overall, he was just solid back there. The Dolphins aren't paying him too much money. So they might want to upgrade at that safety position. But overall, I think they're not paying him a lot of money. So for what he's worth and what he's been able to do, I think he's worth the cash for the Dolphins' perspective. And then let's go to the linebackers for a second. I mean, Josh Boyer and Brian Flores used the linebackers a lot this year in blitz scenarios. They would do their amoeba defense where on third downs, they'd kind of have like 6 to 8 guys at the line of scrimmage, and you wouldn't really know who's coming and who's going. And that was something that really worked. And it was thanks to very good linebackers that could get to the quarterback, and guys like Kyle Van Noy, Jerome Baker, and Andrew Van Ginkel. So let's start with Kyle Van Noy. This guy had 6 sacks on the season, and he was fantastic. He was a great leader for this Miami Dolphins defense. He had 69 total tackles, and he was just fantastic. I mean, very, very, very good in getting to the quarterback. And even causing a forced fumble against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I just thought he did a very good job. And then Jerome Baker was one of the best players on the Dolphins defense, if not the second best player on the Dolphins defense this season. Very underrated guy. Probably should have made the Pro Bowl with the season. I mean, he had 112 total tackles, 7 sacks, 8 tackles for loss, 3 pass deflections. I mean, he was fantastic. And Jerome Baker has been a guy that I've been excited about for a very long time. One of the few bright spots from last year on this Dolphins defense. But overall, he has been really good, and he's continuing to grow. I mean, he had a big sack against Patrick Mahomes this season. Is something that the Dolphins can really build around in the linebacking core. And finally, Andrew Van Ginkel was a name that showed up towards the end of the season. I think he had 5.5 sacks on the year. And he was fantastic, mostly as a special teamer, but he had timely sacks, timely forced fumbles. He had a big forced fumble against Melvin Gordon in that Broncos game that kept the Dolphins in that game. He had a big punt block against the Los Angeles Chargers and a big touchdown return off a fumble against the Rams. So he was all over the place, the core of this Dolphins defense. And he was just that heart and that soul and that driving factor that really pushed this Dolphins defense forward at times. He came up with tons of big plays down the stretch. So I really like what I saw from Andrew Van Ginkel, and he's another guy that they're probably going to want to develop. However, I think moving forward, the Dolphins probably want another outside linebacker that they can probably allow to rush the passer. a little bit more. They lacked a little bit of that from the linebacker position, I think from the outside linebacker position. Yes, they did get a lot of sacks from the linebacker position because they blitzed a lot, but I think they need another linebacker, so look for that coming in the draft. And then finally, up front, let's look at the edge rushers. Emmanuel Ogbah and Shaq Lawson were the two guys that the Dolphins brought in this offseason, and I think Emmanuel Ogbah was awesome. Fantastic. I mean, complete steal. He's definitely in line for a contract extension. I don't want the Dolphins to overpay on him because he wasn't really there down the stretch as much as he was earlier in the season, but he had a very good run of games early on where he was getting to the quarterback a lot. And when I mean a lot, I mean a lot. I mean, he ended up finishing with a team-leading 9 sacks, 42 total tackles, 10.5 tackles for loss, and 5 pass deflections. He was very good at getting his hands on footballs, tipping them at the line of scrimmage. But overall, he was fantastic this year. Definitely in line for a contract extension. He's got 1 year left on his deal and about $7.5 million. And then Shaq Lawson was another guy. I think he finished the season with 4 sacks. He was very good at getting to the quarterback too, and him and Emmanuel Ogbah were very good. But this offseason, the Dolphins really need another pass rusher who can get to the quarterback because I think that they need a 10 plus, 11 plus sack guy, and I think that would take them over the edge on defense. And finally, the run stuffers in the middle, defensive tackles. They did lose Devon Godshaw early on in the season to an injury, but that didn't really affect them. Zach Sealer, Raekwon Davis, as well as Christian Wilkins were really good. Zach Sealer was very good. He earned a new contract this season, and I mean, he was fantastic. 1, getting to the quarterback, 2, run stuffing, as well as just being an overall presence on that defensive line. And so was Christian Wilkins. He really grew into the season. I really like what I saw from him this year. I just really enjoyed his ability to, 1, pressure the quarterback from the inside of that offensive line, of that defensive line, and really just be able to just get his hands on stuff and really be able to be a great run defender too. But most importantly, I love what I saw from Raekwon Davis this year, the 2nd round pick out of Alabama just last April. I mean, he was a big playmaking presence, big hulking presence. I mean, he's a huge guy who was able to really control the line of scrimmage for the Dolphins, especially from a run stopping perspective. And from weeks 12 and on, pretty much, Raekwon Davis was fantastic. He was one of the best rookie defensive tackles in the NFL, if not the best rookie defensive tackle in the NFL. I know he was graded as one of the highest graded PFF rookie defensive tackles in the league. So overall, Raekwon Davis had a very good season, very good pick. And I don't know if Devon Godshaw is going to be a guy that the Dolphins are going to want to re-sign. He wants upwards of $8 to $10 million. And I just don't know if he's worth that with the guys that the Dolphins currently have, and Zach Sealer and Christian Wilkins and Raekwon Davis, who are being very good on that defensive line. And finally, let's just look at the fantastic season by the special teams, by Jason Sanders and Matt Haack. Sanders was fantastic. He broke the Dolphins' consecutive field goals made record this season, but he was overall really good. He got snubbed from the Pro Bowl, and so did Matt Haack, who was a very good punter. So the specialists were good this year. And then looking towards the offseason, I mean, the Dolphins have a lot to decide. They own picks 3, 18, 35, and 50. So that's 4 picks in the first 50 picks, where they have a lot to decide on their future. Are they going to go wide receiver, running back, edge defender? What are they going to do? Okay, is Tua the long-term answer? And that really stems from the play that we saw from guys like Justin Herbert, as well as guys from like Jalen Hurts, who had fantastic rookie seasons. Yes, Joe Burrow played well, but I mean, he got injured, and he was expected to play well too. So I think Tua, obviously being picked before a guy like Hurts and before a guy like Herbert, there's going to be question marks around it. There's going to be a clock ticking on him. And with that 3rd overall pick, I think the only guys that you could probably take at the quarterback position would be Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, or Trevor Lawrence. That would be acceptable. And personally, I do not like Zach Wilson at all. He's not a guy that I really like from what I've seen, and also he wouldn't really fit the Dolphins way that they've drafted. The Dolphins have drafted under Brian Flores and Chris Greer, getting guys from big schools that have championship pedigree and big game experience. Guys like Tua Tagovailoa, obviously at Alabama. That's something that the Dolphins really predicated themselves on. So really, I think that Trevor Lawrence coming from Clemson, obviously big program, Justin Fields, big program with winning championship pedigree, those would be good fits. However, I don't know if the Dolphins would be taking either of them at number 3. Maybe if they decide to trade back, that'd probably be for a wide receiver. You probably don't want to take a wide receiver in the top 3. Jamar Chase and DeVonta Smith are options that I think are very good. And then a running back is something that I would like to see the Dolphins get. Is it Najee Harris? Is it Travis Etienne? Those are good options probably later in the draft, maybe in the middle of the 1st round, maybe in the early 2nd round. Do remember that the Dolphins have an early 2nd round pick, which I think would be a great pick for that 2nd running back that the Dolphins need on that roster. in front of Myles Gaskin. And then look for them to get a running back. As I said, an edge defender or a linebacker is a good thing that I think I would like to see from them. A guy like Gregory Rousseau could be an interesting pick. High upside guy. Edge defender from the University of Miami. He was projected to be a top 3, top 5 pick in the NFL draft. However, he ended up opting out of the college season this year, and that's going to make his draft stock fall down. Is it going to fall down all the way to 18? Maybe, maybe not. I think he's a very talented player, and I'd really like to see him play in Miami. Obviously, good fit, University of Miami guy, and coming to the Dolphins, that'd be a great fit. But I don't know if he'd fall to 18, but I think he would be a good fit in the Dolphins defense. But overall, this offseason is all about adding speed and playmaking ability to this offense. You need to add playmakers at wide receiver, at running back, as well as at edge rusher, as well as maybe a safety. So that's what the Dolphins are going to need to do. They have a lot of cap space this offseason. They've got about the 7th most cap space with about $33 million. So it's going to be interesting what Brian Flores and Chris Greer are going to do. And I think that's going to be really what it comes down to. Is Tua the long-term answer? If you do not believe that, or if you have a hint of doubt of that, take a quarterback at number 3 overall. Double down at quarterback if you want it. But if you believe Tua is the guy, then surround him with weapons. And you're going to need to surround whoever you're putting there next season with weapons. I mean, this Dolphins team is way ahead in their rebuild with a lot of cap space. And I mean, they're coming off a 10-win season. Last year they won 5 games. This year they won 10 games. And I was expecting them to win somewhere between 6 and 8 games this season. And they won 10. We're in the playoff picture until the very end. So this was a fun season when it comes to the Dolphins. But I mean, moving forward, they need a wide receiver. They need to add weapons around Tua. And this offseason, if they don't make the right moves and they end up missing the playoffs next year, it's going to be a disappointment. So watch out for the Dolphins next season and in this offseason to make some moves to improve this roster. With that said, I hope you enjoyed the video. That's going to finish the video. If you guys have any video suggestions for me, anything you guys want to see, please feel free to drop that into the comment section down below. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. So with that said, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please drop a like and subscribe. It really helps my channel grow. I'd really appreciate it. And until next time, see ya.